Going green is no longer a matter of choice for countries and businesses around the world. As societies look to recover from the impact of the coronavirus pandemic and rebuild their livelihoods, they are having to prepare for a more efficient and sustainable way of life that is low emission and resilient to climate-related changes in socially inclusive ways. And enabling this transition through innovative partnerships is what the P4G summit in Seoul next month will focus on as heads of state, businesses and social society leaders gather at the digital forum. Today we speak with Frank Griesberman, Director General of the Global Green Growth Institute based here in Seoul. Now, GGGI was established by a United Nations treaty in 2012 as an intergovernmental organisation to supporting economic growth in developing and emerging countries in ways that are inclusive and sustainable. And he will be taking part in the P4G summit in late May. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. And it's a great honour to have you here with us. Welcome to the show.
My pleasure.
Well, if I may call you Frank,
Yes, please.
Well, we'll go straight into the questions now, Frank. So as countries aim to really recover from this COVID-19 pandemic, a lot of governments are really looking to go very big on green investment. And that's exactly what your organisation has been doing for nearly a decade. So first of all, it will be great to hear from your perspective what makes a green recovery.
Well, of course, for a green recovery, the top priority and the number 2 priority, the number 3 priority is jobs, coming up with plans that provide new green jobs. The good news is many of those green investments that we've been arguing for, particularly in areas like renewable energy, do provide more green jobs than their brown or fossil fuel alternative. So we've been able to show to countries that if they just implement what they had promised on climate action, they can generate 2-3 times more jobs than they would have if they invest in a coal-fired power plant. So renewable energy, but also electric buses or climate-smart agriculture do actually provide a big boost in green employment, and that's just what countries are looking for when they recover from them.
And of course, this is going to require quite a lot of investment, and it's going to require turning away from coal, as you mentioned. So many industrialized nations, they were rather reluctant to take this leap, and they believe that there's this huge trade-off between economic growth and environmental sustainability. How would green recovery plans, though, how would it really help build back better and also support the growth of jobs?
Well, what you refer to has been the discourse for a long time, but unfortunately for those that are pushing coal-fired power plants still today, that's no longer true. After the financial crisis, the global financial crisis, 2008, 2009, indeed, there was a bit of a blip and some push for renewable energy, but coal-fired power plants were built still at a record pace. But the prices have changed. Renewable energy now is the cheapest form of energy. So frankly, if you're still building a coal-fired power plant, you're simply not making a smart economic decision. Renewable energy is the cheapest of investment that countries can make. And while it's not quite the case yet for, say, electric buses or electric cars, that is going to come very soon as well. So yes, there is no longer this contradiction between economic development and sustainability. Green is simply the smartest choice to go forward.
Well, and it's the choice that almost all governments are really making to really recover from this pandemic. And the one that grabbed the most attention is the United States, of course, being the world's largest economy, and the new president, President Biden, having announced his intentions to roll out the $2 trillion infrastructure plan. And it certainly is going to take an extraordinary amount of funding to make this green transformation happen. But then the US president, he is really relying on an infrastructure subsidy plan. On the other hand, we see European countries working with carbon taxes. Which approach do you think is more effective or realistic?
Well, neither is really betting on only one horse. Yes, President Biden has announced his infrastructure plan, not yet accepted by Congress, of course. But in the US, there are also quite a few carbon markets, so they are using carbon pricing as well. And of course, we were super happy that in the Leader Summit, President Biden promised to up their target to 50%, joining the European Union and the UK, and then to see that Japan also committed to 46%. That really can only happen through both those investments and the carbon prices. Same for Europe. They have carbon prices, but they also have their new Green Deal, which is similarly a very large investment. So I think we need both.
And well, with the major changes to infrastructure, business models, and all the necessary measures needed for a green transformation, lower income countries, developing countries, emerging countries, they simply don't have the money or the capacity to really move forward in this. How has GGGI been supporting these countries, especially during this pandemic time?
Well, that's indeed exactly the group that we're focused on, of course. And partly we help to show them what the right plans are so that they are set, if you like, to mobilize money. And then we help them to develop those projects. And if governments put the right enabling conditions, the right policies, we can attract private sector finance. But you're quite right. Developing countries generally don't have the money for a Green New Deal like Korea or the US or the EU. So they have to find other ways to mobilize money. Some of that will have to come from development aid, including from Korea or from the Green Climate Fund. And we can actually then use that money to attract the private sector into those green investment projects. So the bulk of it will actually come from the private sector, but government support, development aid can play a huge role to make that happen.
Right, and as part of the Paris Agreement, low-income countries were supposed to get more support to really finance their transition to a green transformation. But then it was recently found that more than 80% of climate finance supplied to developing countries were actually made up of loans rather than grants. How troubling is this funding gap, and especially at this time when countries are already grappling with the pandemic-era economic recessions and the debt burden? Do you think there should be certain changes to the way development assistance is implemented?
Well, the loans actually don't trouble me that much. It is true that we need more of that financial support. The world had promised 100 billion to developing countries, and we're not quite reaching that. And when you see the investments made by Korea or the EU or the US in just their own green recovery, you also realize that that is costing trillions. So even that 100 billion, even though it sounds like a lot of money, isn't really enough. But frankly, yes, it might seem more attractive to just get grants, but if you get money, $1 million is just $1 million. If you use that money as part of a loan or even equity, shares as the Green Climate Fund, and then it can leverage, it can bring in the private sector. So 1 million can become 3 or 5 million. So the most interesting thing, frankly, is to use that small amount of concessional finance, the money at preferential conditions, right, from development aid or GCF, to attract a much larger amount of private sector investment. That in the end is going to be the only way that developing countries are going to have enough money. A lot of innovative financial products will help to grow the total volume of support that can come to those countries.
Well, I'm sure you'll be exploring these innovative measures and new ways of doing business as well, and having different sectors of society come together to come up with solutions at this P4G summit that you're going to partake in next month. And of course, that's expected to lay the groundwork for the worldwide UN Climate Conference, or COP26, in Glasgow this year. What are you hoping to see from the P4G summit?
Well, all eyes will be on the Korean president. Later this year, there will be an announcement for a higher number. So obviously, that puts a lot of expectation from our side that he will indeed use P4G summit as a platform to announce Korea's more ambitious effort on climate. And yes, the bar has now been set quite high, right? It should be at least 40, ideally approaching 50%, to be in the same company as those other countries that are in the forefront.
Right, so at least 40 or 50%. Right now we're looking to go net zero by 2050, South Korea, I mean. Do you think that's ambitious enough? There has been some criticism that the Green New Deal, it doesn't really set as ambitious targets as it should do compared to other countries.
So that is true. The Green New Deal was a promise for big investments without a clear target. You're quite right. But then net zero 2050 is that clear target. But of course, some people might say, well, is there a credible plan? So that is really what the focus is now. Most people, most scientists would believe that if you have a target with a credible plan behind it to go to about 40 to 50% by 2030, then you're on the right path that puts you in a position to achieve net zero by 2050. So yes, that really means that between the Green New Deal and then the net zero target of 2050, now the last big missing piece of the puzzle is a strong commitment with backup plans of 100%.
Right, and well, South Korea is hosting the P4G summit, and of course your organisation, GGGI, is also based here in the country. So while Korea hasn't exactly been right at the forefront of tackling climate change, are you seeing it take on more of a leading role? I mean, what kind of further changes would you like to see from the country?
Well, we were just discussing it. If Korea indeed makes a strong commitment at the P4G summit for net zero, backed up by a good target for 2030, then I think it is in a very good position to lead, particularly in Asia. You know, there will be other countries coming to summit like Vietnam and Indonesia that haven't yet made those net zero commitments, that are very strong partners of Korea, where there's a very large private sector investment. So we're really hoping and thinking that Korea will be in a good position, that after the president commits to, let's say, 50%, by 2030, that will be backed up by influencing other countries to get onto that road. And yes, also to green Korea's ODA. So Korea has a good development assistance program through quite a few organizations, KOICA, Korean Exim Bank, other ministries. Not too much of that is yet green. So we're really hoping that, you know, the president said, Korean government will no longer subsidize new coal-fired power plants in places like Vietnam and Indonesia and Mongolia, where Korea has been a very big investor to date. That's excellent news. And that really means that now, instead of those coal-fired power plants, we're looking forward to Korea investing in, you know, wind energy, renewable energy, battery swapping, smart grids. There are many good areas of green investment where Korea is a strong player, where the private sector can make a contribution. And instead of funding coal-fired power plants, we hope that the government will lead in Asia by financing those other deals. Right. That's in Asia, where there are a lot of emissions. And of course, in Africa and in small islands, we hope the government will help those countries become more resilient to climate change. But that's a bit of a separate.
Right. And in Asia, of course, in countries like Vietnam, of course, companies like Samsung, they're massive employers in that country. They have thousands and thousands of jobs, and those are going to be green jobs with this transition. So that's quite a big commitment. And well, lastly, next year is actually going to be the 10th year that GGGI was established. What are you hoping to achieve by then, and in what ways do you hope to continue your partnership with the South Korean government as well?
Well, this is a very challenging time. We are very aware that many of our member countries are still hugely suffering from COVID. You know, countries like Fiji, where they were relying on tourism, 40% of their income fell away all at once. You know, countries like India, you must be aware, are struggling massively with the pandemic right now. We do believe that this green recovery, once vaccines and so on are kicking in, is absolutely vital. We expect Korea to lead the way, and obviously we are totally ready to play that role as intermediary to help Korean companies find those green projects, to help developing countries come up with those plans, and to accelerate the green transition. We really think this is an exciting time. We have to step up, and we see a lot of willingness, as you started this interview, from governments to make that happen. Now we really need to translate that into action.
Right, and hopefully we'll see some of that action start to form at this P4G summit next month. So we'll look forward to developments there. That was Frank Riesberman, Director General of the Global Green Growth Institute. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me.
And to our viewers, as always, thank you very much for watching.